Ashland, North Carolina, late October. The porch light was always on when I came home. Every single time for 11 years, that yellow bulb burned over the front steps like a small promise. Someone's waiting for you. That Thursday night, it was off. I sat in my truck in the driveway for a full minute before I even opened the door, staring at the dark windows, telling myself it was nothing. Ashley probably fell asleep early. Noah probably left a light on somewhere, and she killed it before bed. Simple explanations. I've always been good at finding simple explanations. That's your problem, Ryan, my father used to say. You'll explain away a house on fire if it lets you keep sleeping at night. I grabbed my duffel bag and walked up the steps into a silence that didn't feel like sleep. It felt like something holding its breath. That's when I heard it, a soft, mechanical hum coming from the laundry room off the kitchen. And under it, something worse, the small, wet sound of a child crying quietly, the kind of crying that's trying very hard not to be heard. Noah? My son was standing at the washing machine in his pajamas, barefoot on the cold tile, folding a bath towel with hands that were shaking so hard he could barely make the corners meet. It was 11:47 at night. He was 9 years old. Buddy, hey, look at me. Where's your mom? He didn't answer. He just looked up at me with an expression I will never forget for as long as I live. Not sadness. Terror, like I'd walked in on something I wasn't supposed to see yet. Then he burst into tears and dropped the towel and grabbed onto my leg like the floor was moving underneath him. Something happened here. Something happened in this house while I was 300 miles away eating a hotel breakfast and worrying about closing costs on a strip mall in Charlotte. I didn't wait for him to explain. I couldn't. I peeled his arms off gently, told him to stay right there, and walked down the hallway toward our bedroom with my heart slamming so hard I could hear it in my ears. I opened the door, and I froze. The room had been stripped down to the studs of a marriage. Ashley's side of the closet, empty. Not she took a few things, empty. Gone empty, down to the hangers swinging on the rod. On the bed sat a suitcase half packed, and next to it, an envelope from a law office I didn't recognize, unsealed, addressed to her. And a phone, not hers. A cheap black flip phone, the kind you buy at a gas station with cash, sitting on the nightstand, screen lit up with a new text message glowing in the dark like it wanted me to see it. I picked it up before I could stop myself. One new message from T. I opened it. Did you tell him yet? We need to move before he gets back. Ta. My hands went numb. My whole body went numb, actually, in that strange, floating way that happens right before something breaks permanently. I read it 4 times. 5, like the words might rearrange themselves into something that made sense. T. There was only one person in my life, whose name started with T, who had any business texting my wife at midnight while I was out of town. My brother, Todd. A quick word before we go further. Where are you watching from tonight? If stories like this hit you somewhere real, hit subscribe, because what happened next in that bedroom changed everything I thought I knew about my own family. Okay, back to the story. I stood there holding a stranger's phone in my dead wife's. No, not dead, not dead. I had to correct myself out loud, whispering it into the empty room like a man trying to talk himself down off a ledge. Not dead, just gone. Worse, maybe. Behind me, I heard small footsteps. Noah had followed me down the hall, and he was standing in the doorway now, watching me hold that phone with an expression that told me everything before he said a single word. You knew about this, I said. Not a question. Noah, did you know? He nodded, once, and the guilt on his face nearly put me on the floor. Uncle Todd said not to tell you, he whispered. He said it would only hurt you if I told you too early. He said Mom would explain when she was ready. My own son, carrying this, alone. For how long? When she was ready to explain what, Bud? He shook his head, and his whole small body started shaking again, and I realized I was pushing a 9-year-old for information he shouldn't have been trusted to hold in the first place, not by his mother, not by my own brother, the man who taught him to ride a bike, the man who stood next to me at our father's funeral with his hand on my shoulder like a promise. I knelt down and pulled him into me instead. Whatever answers I needed, they weren't going to come out of my child tonight. I could see that now. He'd already given more than a 9-year-old should ever have to give. It's okay, I told him, even though nothing about it was okay. You're not in trouble. Not ever. You hear me? He nodded into my shoulder, and I held him there in the dark hallway of a house that used to feel like the safest place on earth, and I stared over his head into the wrecked bedroom, and something in my chest went very cold and very still. This wasn't a woman leaving her husband. This was an operation, planned, timed, executed while I was out of state, and couldn't do a single thing to stop it. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at the kitchen table until sunrise with that black flip phone in front of me, watching it like it might ring again and give me another piece of the truth. It didn't. Around 6 a.m., I finally worked up the nerve to call the one person who might actually explain any of this to me. My accountant. Not because I suspected money, not yet, not fully, but because some instinct, some old survival wiring, told me that whatever had just been ripped out from under me had probably started with numbers before it ever showed up in a bedroom. I was right. I just had no idea how right. Maybe you already know what it feels like, walking into your own home, and realizing the people you trusted most had a plan that didn't include you. I don't know what you would have done standing in that hallway. I'm still not sure I did the right thing. 3 days later, sitting in a leather chair across from my accountant, David Hensley, in an office that smelled like burnt coffee and old carpet, I watched a man I'd known for 6 years go pale reading numbers off his own screen. Ryan, he said slowly, when's the last time you looked at the family trust your father set up? The one for Noah's college fund? I don't know. Months. Why? He turned the monitor around. Over the last 14 months, in withdrawals of just under $10,000 at a time, small enough to avoid the kind of reporting flags that would have triggered an automatic review, someone had drained the trust from just over $400,000 down to $11,000 and change. The authorized co-signer on every single withdrawal was my brother's name, Todd Coleman, the same Todd who'd been in my house, the same Todd whose message was still sitting on a burner phone in my kitchen drawer at that very moment, the same Todd who stood beside me and Ashley at our wedding and gave a toast about family being the one thing you can always count on. 14 months. That timeline hit me like a fist to the sternum. 14 months ago was almost exactly when I'd taken the promotion, the one that meant more travel, more nights away, more time for someone to move pieces around a board I didn't even know I was playing on. I sat in that chair and did the math in my head, and the math told me something I wasn't ready to hear yet. This hadn't started with Ashley packing a suitcase. This had started the moment I said yes to a job that took me out of my own house, and somebody had been counting on exactly that. I drove home that afternoon under a gray October sky, the kind that promises rain and never quite delivers it, and I sat in my driveway again, porch lights still. Dark, still off, because apparently nobody in this family thought to turn it back on for me, and I made myself a promise before I even opened the truck door. I am not going to be the man who explains this away, not this time. I didn't know yet what that promise would cost me. I didn't know how far I'd have to go, how much of myself I'd have to bury to become someone capable of what came next. All I knew, sitting there in the dark with my hands still shaking on the steering wheel, was that somewhere in that house, my son was waiting for me with answers he was too afraid to give. And somewhere out there, my brother and my wife were still texting each other, still moving pieces, still assuming I was too broken to notice. They had no idea what they just started. Ashland, North Carolina, early November. Grief has a smell, if you let it sit long enough in a house. By the second week, mine smelled like cold coffee and unwashed laundry because I stopped doing the thing Noah had been doing alone that first terrible night. I just let it pile up in the corner of the laundry room, like a monument to the life that used to run on schedule. I want to tell you I fell apart quietly. I didn't. I fell apart the way most men do. Badly privately, at 2 a.m. with a phone in my hand and 40 unsent messages to my brother sitting in the draft folder because some small, stubborn piece of me kept typing, "How could you?" and then deleting it before I hit send. Ashley had moved into a rental across town. A beige little duplex on Crestline that I drove past exactly once at 11 at night and never again, because I didn't trust what I'd do if I saw Todd's truck in that driveway. Custody of Noah was temporary and shared, according to the lawyer I hadn't hired yet, which was a polite way of saying nobody had decided anything, and my son was sleeping in 2 different beds in 1 week, like a piece of luggage nobody wanted to carry all the way home. You have to be smart now, Ryan. Furious doesn't win. Furious just confirms every story they're already telling people about you. That thought is the one that saved me. Not because I'm some kind of saint, because I finally understood something about my brother that I'd been too loyal to see for 39 years. Todd had never once, in his whole life, beaten me by being smarter. He'd beaten me by being patient, by waiting until I wasn't looking. So I decided to stop looking away first. The first thing I did was hire David Hensley, not just as my accountant anymore, but to quietly pull every financial document tied to my father's trust, going back 3 full years, further than the 14 months Todd thought I'd find. I told David one thing, and I meant it. I don't want revenge numbers. I want court numbers. Numbers a judge can't argue with. The second thing I did was call a lawyer named Priya Anand, recommended by a coworker who'd gone through her own ugly divorce 2 years back. Priya had a voice like a closing door, final, calm, no wasted words. In our first meeting, she asked me one question that reorganized my entire plan. Mr. Coleman, do you want to win your marriage back, or do you want to win everything else? I sat with that question longer than I want to admit. Everything else, I said finally. She already made her choice. I just want to make sure my son isn't the one who pays for it. Priya nodded, like she'd been waiting for that answer. Then we're not filing angry, we're filing thorough. There's a difference, and it's the difference between losing in 6 months and winning in 18. 18 months. The number sat in my chest like a stone. I didn't know yet that I wouldn't need nearly that long, because I didn't know yet what Priya was about to help me find. Before we go further, where's everyone watching from tonight? If you've ever had to rebuild something quietly while everyone around you thought you were falling apart, you already know exactly what this next part feels like. Subscribe if you want to see how far Ryan's willing to go. Now, back to the story. 3 weeks in, Noah started talking again. Really talking, not the flat, careful answers he'd been giving me since that night at the washing machine. We were in the truck, driving back from his Thursday counseling session, when he said, out of nowhere, staring out the window like it cost him something to say it, Uncle Todd used to come by a lot, even before you started traveling more. I kept my eyes on the road. Don't react. Don't scare him back into silence. How much before, bud? I don't know. A long time. He used to help Mom with paperwork stuff in the office. He told me it was boring grown-up stuff and I shouldn't ask about it. He paused. He gave me $20 once and told me not to mention he was there. There it is. Not just an affair that started 14 months ago when the withdrawals began. Something older. Something that had been quietly setting up shop in my house for who knows how long, before it ever touched the trust fund. Which meant the money wasn't the beginning. The money was just the part they'd finally gotten greedy enough to leave a trail on. I called David that night and gave him a new instruction. Go back 5 years, not 3. Check every document with my father's signature and every document with Todd's. David called back 2 days later, and his voice had a strange, careful quality to it. A man trying to deliver bad news slowly to soften the landing. Ryan, I need you to sit down for this one. I'm sitting. Your father's will, the original one filed 11 years ago, it named you as sole executor and majority beneficiary of the trust like you always knew. But there's an amendment filed 4 years ago, notarized. It adds a co-executor. My stomach dropped before he even said the name. Todd, I said. Todd, David confirmed. Ryan, your dad added your brother as co-executor 4 years ago and never told you. Which means for 4 years Todd's had full legal authority to move money in and out of that trust anytime he wanted. And you'd have had to catch it on paper to even know. 4 years, not 14 months. Not an affair that spiraled into greed. A door that had been standing wide open since before Noah was even in 2nd grade, and my own father had been the one holding it open. I sat with the phone against my ear for a long time after David stopped talking, staring at the wall of my kitchen, trying to figure out which betrayal hurt worse. The brother who'd been robbing me for years, or the father who'd apparently trusted him more than he trusted me and never said a word about it? Why would Dad do that? What did he know about Todd that I didn't? I found the answer 2 weeks later, and it came from the last person I expected. My father's old business partner, a wiry, sun-beaten man named Carl Whitfield, who'd run the hardware supply company with my dad for almost 30 years before retiring to a fishing cabin near Lake Norman, called me out of nowhere on a Tuesday evening. He said he'd heard, through the grapevine — Ashland's a small enough town that everything eventually makes it through some grapevine — that things had gotten bad in my family, and he wanted to tell me something he probably should have told me years ago. Your daddy amended that trust because Todd came to him crying about gambling debt, Carl said, his voice rough over the phone line. Big debt, the kind that gets a man's kneecaps broken if it goes unpaid long enough. Your father bailed him out once, quiet-like, and added him to the trust as a safety net, I guess, case it ever happened again, and your dad wasn't around to help. And he never told me. He was ashamed, Ryan. Ashamed of Todd, and I think a little ashamed that he couldn't fix it himself. Your daddy wasn't always good at telling the truth when the truth made him look weak. You know that better than most. I sat with the phone in my hand long after Carl hung up, staring out at a front yard covered in the season's first frost, and something shifted in me that night. Not forgiveness, nothing close to that, but understanding. Todd hadn't drained that trust because he suddenly turned into a monster 14 months ago. He'd been drowning for years. And instead of asking me for help, he decided it was easier to take what he needed from a brother too busy chasing a promotion to notice his own house going quiet around him. That doesn't excuse what he did to Noah. It doesn't excuse what he did with Ashley. But it tells me something important. It tells me exactly where his fear lives. And fear is a door, if you know how to knock on it right. Maybe you've had a moment like that. Finding out the person who hurt you the most was drowning the whole time, and somehow that makes it both easier and so much harder to be angry. I still don't know which one I felt more, standing in that yard. By the 3rd week of November, I had 3 separate threads pulling tight in my hands at once, Priya building a custody and asset case airtight enough that Ashley's lawyer had already started sounding nervous on the phone, David compiling a financial trail going back 4 years with Todd's signature on every page. And somewhere underneath both of those, a piece of information Carl had given me almost as an afterthought, right before he hung up. Something he said so casually, I almost missed how much it was worth. You know your daddy left something else besides the trust, right? A second policy. Small life insurance thing, separate from everything else, taken out right around the time he added Todd to the paperwork. Man never canceled it. Ought to still be sitting there. I hadn't known. Neither, I was willing to bet everything I had left, did Todd. I hung up the phone that night and sat in the dark kitchen where this whole thing started, and for the first time since I'd walked in on my son crying alone at a washing machine, I felt something other than grief. I felt the shape of a plan. Because if there was a second policy sitting untouched somewhere, quiet and legally mine to find, then, for the first time since October, I had something Todd didn't know existed. And in a fight like this one, the thing your enemy doesn't know you're holding is worth more than every dollar he's already stolen. Ashland, North Carolina, mid-December. Snow doesn't come often to Ashland. Maybe twice a winter, if we're lucky. A thin gray dusting that melts by noon. It came the week everything finally broke open, and I remember thinking, standing in the courthouse parking lot with frost on my windshield, that it felt less like weather and more like the world quietly redrawing the lines around my life. Priya had built the case exactly the way she promised. Thorough, not angry. 4 years of Todd's signature on withdrawal after withdrawal. Text messages recovered off that burner phone, which turned out to belong to a prepaid account Todd had bought with cash at a gas station on Route 9, a purchase caught on grainy security footage David had quietly subpoenaed weeks earlier. A paper trail so complete that Ashley's own lawyer called Priya's office 2 days before the hearing and asked, off the record, whether a settlement might be possible before this went any further. But I wasn't ready for a settlement. Not yet. Because Carl's offhand comment about a second insurance policy had turned into something none of us expected. David found it buried in an old filing cabinet in my father's storage unit. A modest term life policy, 20 years old, worth $180,000, naming my father's estate as beneficiary meant to flow directly into the trust upon his death. It should have been paid out 9 years ago when Dad passed. It never was, because Todd, as co-executor, had quietly let it lapse into a dormant account instead of filing the claim, and then, 3 years later, used his signing authority to redirect a partial payout from that same dormant account into a shell LLC registered under Ashley's maiden name, my father's death benefit. The money meant to protect this family after he was gone, and Todd used it to build an escape hatch for the two of them. I sat across from Priya's desk when she laid it out for me, and for the first time in 2 months, I didn't feel grief. I felt something colder, cleaner, clarity. "This isn't a divorce case anymore, Ryan," Priya said quietly. "This is fraud, elder estate fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, and depending on how the DA wants to read the burner phone timeline, potentially conspiracy. Todd isn't just going to lose access to your trust. He could be looking at real prison time." And there it was, the door I didn't know I'd been standing in front of this whole time. If you've made it this far, you already know this isn't really a story about money. It's about what people do when they think nobody's watching. I appreciate every one of you who's stuck with Ryan this long. Now let's finish it. I requested one thing from Priya before we filed anything. A meeting, not a courtroom ambush. A room, a table, both of them. David's documents laid out in front of everyone, and Noah nowhere near it. Todd walked in first, 3 days before Christmas, wearing the same brown jacket he'd worn to our father's funeral. He looked thinner than I remembered. Ashley came in behind him, and I watched her eyes go straight to the folder on the table before they ever found mine. She already knows what's in it. She's been waiting for this moment for weeks, same as me. "Ryan," Todd started. "Sit down," I said. Not loud. I didn't need loud anymore. I laid it out the way David had laid it out for me. The 4-year amendment, the withdrawals, the burner phone, the lapsed policy, the shell company with Ashley's name on the paperwork. I watched my brother's face go through every stage of a man realizing the walls have already closed in around him before he even knew they were being built. "I could have gone straight to the DA, I said. Priya wanted me to. I didn't. Not yet, because I want to understand something first, and I want the truth, right now, in this room, before I decide what happens next." Todd's hands were shaking on the table. "I was going to pay it back. I swear to God, Ryan, I was going to—" "Stop!" I didn't raise my voice. "I know about the gambling. I know Dad bailed you out once and never told me. I know you've probably been scared for years that if I ever found out what kind of man you really are, you'd lose everything. Your name in this family, your place at the holidays, all of it." I let that sit. "But you didn't just steal money, Todd. You used my son. You made a 9-year-old carry a secret that wasn't his to carry, and you let him sit alone at a washing machine at midnight because neither of you had the decency to be there when he needed someone." Ashley finally spoke, her voice cracking. "I never wanted him to see any of it. I tried to protect him from—" "You didn't protect him," I said. "You just moved him out of your way while you packed." The room went silent except for the hum of the building's old heating vents, and I let it stay silent because I wasn't done, and I wanted them both to sit inside that silence and understand exactly how heavy it was. Here's the twist: I hadn't told Priya, hadn't told David, hadn't told anyone. Not because I was hiding it, but because I hadn't decided if I could actually go through with it until I was sitting in that room, watching my brother fall apart in front of me. I didn't want him in prison. I wanted him to lose the thing he'd been protecting his whole life, the illusion in front of the whole family, that he was the good brother, the reliable one, the one Dad trusted more. I wanted the truth out permanently, undeniably, so that no one in Ashland could ever again look at Todd Coleman and see anything but exactly what he was. But prison meant Noah's uncle in an orange jumpsuit for the next decade. It meant explaining to a 10-year-old someday why the man who taught him to ride a bike was behind bars. And more than that, it meant Todd never had to face what he'd actually done in daylight, among people who knew him. Prison would let him disappear. I didn't want him to disappear. I wanted him to stay and live every single day inside the wreckage he'd built. "Here's what's going to happen," I said. "You're going to sign over full restitution, every dollar, every asset tied to that LLC, back into an irrevocable trust in Noah's name, one neither of you can touch, ever under any circumstance. Priya's already drafted it. You're going to resign as co-executor of Dad's estate, in writing, notarized, today. And you're going to tell every single person at Mom's family Christmas next week exactly what you did. Not me telling them, you. Todd's face went white. Ryan, I can't. You can. Or Priya makes one phone call to the district attorney's office tomorrow morning, and this becomes a criminal matter instead of a family one. Your choice. You've got until 5 o'clock. I stood up before either of them could answer because I already knew what they'd choose. Prison was a fear neither of them had the stomach for. Public shame, on the other hand, shame in front of aunts and cousins and the people who'd known them their whole lives, that was a punishment tailored exactly to the two people who'd built their entire betrayal on secrecy. Some men you break with a courtroom. Some men you break by taking away the one thing they were hiding behind. Maybe you would have called the DA that same day. Maybe you would have wanted them to pay in a courtroom instead of a living room. I've asked myself 100 times if I chose mercy or something colder than mercy. I still don't have a clean answer. They signed by 4:40 that afternoon. Christmas at my aunt's house was quieter than I'd ever heard it. Todd stood up before dinner, in front of 11 family members who thought they were there for ham and green bean casserole, and told them in a shaking voice exactly what he'd done. The money, the affair, the 4 years of lies dressed up as brotherly love. Nobody said a word for almost a full minute. My Aunt Ruth got up and left the table. My cousin Danny didn't speak to him again that whole night. I didn't feel triumphant watching it happen. I thought I would. Instead, I felt something closer to exhaustion, the specific tiredness of a man who's been carrying something heavy for so long that even setting it down aches. Noah's trust was funded in full by New Year's Eve, $180,000 from the insurance policy, plus everything recovered from the Shell LLC, locked away until his 18th birthday, untouchable by anyone, including me. Ashley moved 2 towns over. She sees Noah every other weekend now, supervised at first, then not, because whatever else she did, she is still his mother. And I decided somewhere in that ugly, cold December that Noah didn't need me to burn down every bridge on his behalf. Just the ones that were actually dangerous to cross. Todd and I don't speak. Maybe someday we will. I'm not the same man who used to explain away every crack in the foundation just to keep the house standing, and I'm not in a hurry to go looking for reasons to trust him again. The porch light is back on every night now. I fixed the bulb myself, first week of January, and I've made sure it never goes out again. Small thing, but it means something to me, and it means something to Noah, who checks it from the truck window every time we pull into the driveway, like he's making sure the world is still where he left it. Some nights, I still walk past the laundry room and see him standing there, folding towels, and for half a second my chest goes tight all over again. Then he looks up, smiles, and asks if I want to help. And I do. Every time. It's become our thing now, oddly enough. Midnight laundry, the two of us, talking about nothing important, which is exactly the kind of nothing I almost lost the chance to have. I got my son back. I got the truth out into the light where it couldn't hide behind anyone's silence anymore. I made sure the people who heard him paid a price they'll carry every single day for the rest of their lives, in front of the people whose opinion mattered most to them. But I never got justice in the way I used to picture it. Clean, total, satisfying. What I got instead was messier and more honest. A brother who has to live every day inside what he did. A woman who gets to keep loving her son from a careful distance. And a boy who's slowly learning that the adults around him can break something and still choose to fix what's left. I think about that hearing sometimes. The version where I let Priya make the call, where Todd spends the next decade somewhere far away instead of at family dinners under everyone's cold silence. I think about whether that would have felt more like justice or just more like revenge dressed up in a different color. If you'd been standing in that room instead of me, would you have chosen prison, or would you have chosen for him to live every day in the wreckage he made? I still don't know if I made the right call. I just know I made the one I could live with.